in the subarctic where it's dark because it's 7 in the morning. Yep, it's dark. Crystal clear, so it's about, 2 degrees above zero. And we have Michael Anderle. Where are you coming to us from, Michael?
I am in Henderson, just 25 minutes from the Strip, Las Vegas.
And joining us today is Steve Campbell, not that one, the other one, and to talk about audio. Where are you coming to us from, Steve?
Sunny Naples, Florida, where it is a balmy 65 degrees right now. It's 11 a.m.
You guys are probably wearing parkas.
It is a little chilly for us. I had to wear a jacket when I took my walk this morning. Don't think any less of me, please.
Of course you did. Well, audio. How many audiobooks have you done, Steve?
From a producing standpoint, a little over 200 with LMBPN, which has been a lot of fun. And then LMBPN, the company, has done another, what do you think, Michael? Another couple hundred through distribution partners.
Oh, no, it's more like 3. You know what? I don't know how many are live at the moment, but we've licensed over 350, I think.
On top of the 200 that have been done internally?
Yeah, 220. Steve's sandbagging a little bit. It's over 220.
So there are very few weeks where we don't have multiple audiobooks coming out at LMBPN.
That is way, way cool. Hey, Michael, can you describe what is your process? Because you publish a lot of books. What's your process for picking, hey, maybe this series should become audio?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Steve is part of the group that helped try to solidify this. But after we started doing audio, because our experience back in the beginning, Steve and I put out the one with Emily Beresford, the Arthurian Gambit, and our experience with that was we put out an audio, we get our money back. We didn't realize that there was a lot. Yeah, quickly, and we didn't realize that there were a lot of things that were really good in the wind with Arthurian Gambit, and it was a little bit, as an outlier from an income standpoint. So in 2017, I think, we started producing quite a few more. And what we did find, we were up to about $20,000, I think, dollars a month we were spending religiously on putting out product, and it wasn't coming back nearly as fast as our ebooks. So we spent 2018 in an effort to, as a company, Judith did this more so than us, but as an effort to acquire relationships with the big 6, 7 different audio platforms. So your Tantors, your Podiums, your recorded books, your graphic audio,
Dreamscape.
Yeah, Dreamscape. Sorry, and others. But anyway, so we spent that because we realized that we ought to be using our partners and the fact that they know how to reach out to to basically their customers more effectively than we knew how to do it. And we looked. I mean, Steve, you talk about how some of the things that we looked at trying to figure out how do you sell to audio customers.
Oh my gosh, we looked at everything. We're basically studying what other vendors were doing. We read a lot. We went to conferences around the world to talk about audio, and eventually, I mean, for us, the best way to market audio is to market the ebook. That's the big key for us. But for audio publishers, they've got their own ways that we, as a small indie publisher, are not really able to mimic yet, for whatever reason. To get back to your original question, Craig, about how do we pick what goes to audio? Initially, we just is this a usual thing for you guys? Craig asks a question and Mike, like a politician, just goes and answers another question.
It is. Usually our conversation is if neither one of us is there. We're just on solo monologue diatribes that are interspersed by moments of silence. So yeah, Steve, you were talking about Naples.
Yeah. All right, let's try and reel this in. I'll try and be the adult here and reel this in.
Good luck.
So initially, what we based it on sales, initial sales of the early books in the series. And the better those early books did, the more likely we felt like we'd be able to get our money back with audio. So we would pursue those pretty hard and just do it ourselves. When we reached the point that Michael was talking about, where we wanted to reach out to partners and license some of the content, that became a question of then organizing things in such a way that those partners can pick and choose what they wanted. And we did that for about 1.5 years, and we really scaled back on what we were producing. And now we've reached the point where we've decided we want to cherry pick our own catalog and pick the things that we think we will have the most success publishing, and make the rest available to partners. And then they pick the things that they think their special niche would have the most success with. And each of these partners have their own genres and subgenres that they do particularly well in.
And that's right. And that's part of shopping it around, is finding where somebody is really good at something. And because I know I'm in military sci-fi in some of my other books, and in that genre, R.C. Bray, you want R.C. Bray as a narrator. Now he's exclusive to Podium, and the new books that are coming out, they contracted with him like 2 years ago in order to get those books. So we don't have that kind of a timeline that we're going to embrace to get somebody like an R.C. Bray, or like Ethon has gotten Nathan Fillion. They used that time earlier in the year, and that ebook went huge. But Nathan Fillion, he did one, and he said, "I'm not doing any more audiobooks. I had some time." So it was a good gap by Podium. But Tantor and Dreamscape have expanded how they've approached things. And I know we've got a new title. One of my books is coming out in February, I believe, from Dreamscape. So all kinds of good things as people are getting on the other side of the COVID shutdown, where a lot of the studios were shut down. So what kind of impact did that have on what you guys are doing with LMBPN?
You know, that's an interesting question. I read over the course of the last couple of days an article or a study basically that talks about the impact of publishing, or of COVID on publishing. And there was a section on audio in there, but fortunately for publishers, this has not been a particularly bad time. In some instances, there have been growth. Some parts of
those that are focused on the paper book industry, a little bit rough for them because of bookstores.
Yes, but they're still showing year-over-year growth. But ebooks are the ones that are showing exponential year-over-year growth, much more so than print. But it's the trad publishers are still obviously publishing things as ebooks as well. Audiobooks, we've all seen the dramatic increase in the sales of audiobooks, and the percentage of increase is beginning to drop a little bit. And maybe that's because of COVID. Maybe that's because people aren't in their car driving back and forth to work now. But it's the first year in the last 5 where the percentage of growth has dropped. It's still growing like 17-18% over the last year, but it's not growing as fast as it had been.
Yeah, just to clarify for some of you who don't know, Steve Campbell is not only VP of operations, but he's also the head of the audio group within LMBPN. So he's been running our audio stuff now for like 3 years, I think, Steve?
That sounds about right. Maybe 4. It all kind of runs together.
Tomato.
Yes.
3 years, 4 years, yeah.
Whatever.
Oh, geez. And January 16th, today is my 5-year anniversary of my first book being published.
We didn't know that.
Congratulations. Is that the one with the hideous cover, or is that
geez, not you too. Yes, yeah, it was a picture of me on the cover, and I did it in PowerPoint. Yeah, baby.
Ego.
Simon & Schuster bought that book. Yeah. So, that title, it was 100,000 words post-apoc. We split it into 2 and eventually added 2 more books. So it became a 4-book series. It has been a pretty big bestseller in the post-apoc realm. But that was my first book. It was called It's Not Enough to Just Exist, which is a bad title for post-apocalyptic survivalist book. So it's been retitled. But that book, when I ran ads, I got teenage girls, 13 to 17, huge mass of input of people jumping onto the ad, but not buying anything because I guess that's a personal perspective that if you're looking for a book to target to teenage girls, I no longer use that title. You can have it. It's not enough to just exist. And they seem to be gravitate towards that title. on my ads, which cost me a lot and got me nothing.
How much do you think the cover featuring you played into that role of bringing in teenage girls who were just wanted to learn more about you and your philosophies on not just existing?
No comment,
Speechless.
Craig.
Speechless.
I think the ads sucked them in, and once they got to the cover, they're like, "I'm not having anything to do with
Out
that."
of here.
So, yeah, no, it.
Audio, guys, audio.
And,
yeah.
and
So
we changed the cover, but still, my most current title is narrated by the guy who narrated that book. And that was one of his first titles 4.5 years ago, as he was in radio for 30 years and then broke into, say, I want to do audiobooks, and got in. And that was one of the first ones. I mean, we got him inexpensively at the time, and he's a lot more now, but also those relationships. So it's important, especially in audio, maintaining relationships with narrators, because we were talking earlier about R.C. Bray, that if he puts out a book, people will get that book. They don't care about who wrote it because they just love his voice and the way he narrates.
So let's talk about that for a minute. And then I want to jump back. Well, actually, Vinny O'Hare just put in a comment in the chat saying that he is listening less audio because he's not in the car. And I think there are a lot of people that are that way. I personally, when I was driving back and forth to an office, I would listen to one audiobook a week. Now I'm down to about one a month, and it's while I'm walking or running. So it's a lot harder to get through audiobooks. But you mentioned R.C. Bray and the importance of a narrator. Recent studies have shown that the choice of a narrator, a voice that someone knows, can impact sales. Well, not sales, decision making by purchasers by about 25%. So for 25% of people, that's one of the first things they look at, which to me, I thought that was surprising.
I thought it would be bigger. Yeah.
So anybody going to start using a pen name? ARESEEBRAE. It's pronounced R.C. Bray.
Yeah.
Spelled completely different.
Yeah, but he is a monster in the genres where he does well. He does unbelievably well, and great get by Podium.
So let's go back a little bit, Steve. You are a massive fan of audiobooks, and you always have been for a long time. What was the experience like the first time you went to New York and you went to an audio publisher's get-together out there by the river in New York City?
Can I pretend that was like 50 years ago and I was a teenager, which will give me a reason for the giddy excitement that I felt when I was doing that in my early 60s?
What the hell?
It was so cool to meet these people that I had been listening to, and I would just be standing there and I would be pointing across this outdoor gathering place, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is Tim Gerard Reynolds, or oh my gosh, that's Hillary Huber. And it was very cool. So it's like a sports junkie being at a baseball card signing thing, except all of the narrators that I met were incredibly gracious and, happy to talk to anybody and just love to talk about the business, and really great people and fun to talk with. So it was a lot of fun to have the opportunity to try and connect the right voice with the right project for LMBPN.
And by the way, I never understood how could you, with a medium where people speak, you knew what they looked like.
Because of the jacket covers.
Uh-huh.
You'd see the face on the back of the old CDs when you buy the 6 or 8 CDs way back before Audible. Plus, you listen to an audiobook and you go, I wonder what that person looks like. I'm curious like that. And
You're an audio stalker.
Yeah, I am. And I would hear voices for people that I didn't recognize. I'd hear voices and go, that's so-and-so. And
I hear voices too, but that's not healthy.
That's because you're all alone in Alaska where it's dark 22 hours a day.
Go back a little bit to what you said a little bit before, because we are trying to deliver to those that are willing to listen to this insights on what it can do on the audio side. You had talked about picking the right voice. What did you learn? Because you did quite a few projects where that was your responsibility.
What did I learn? You really need to understand who the character is, who the primary character is in a book. If there is a single character, and make sure that that voice matches up with that person. It's not so much, I know for you, Michael, when you were first selecting Emily, you wanted to hear how she did all of the various voices,
Well,
men, women,
she
etc.
had to, yeah, so she had to be able to do Bethany Ann. That was the primary. Secondary, I wanted to make sure that a lady could do a passable male voice. So it didn't have to be a perfect male voice, but it had to be something that we could believe. And tertiary, I wanted that person to be able to read like the address book or something, very benign. I wanted them to be able to read it and at least make me feel interested because of the cadence of their voice. And those were my 3 prerequisites when and then I kicked them and said, we need 7 books and possibly 21. And we had a few people drop off when I said that, and Emily was all for it.
Yeah, so that's a couple different issues that you bring up, and we'll circle back to the voice issue and the importance of having, for you, the primary was that Emily could do Bethany Ann, and the others were tertiary things. You wanted it to be good enough. You could tell when it was a gruff general, for example. But the real key was Bethany Ann. And I think that's the big key to success with audiobooks and picking the narrators, is getting that voice right for the primary character, if there is a primary character who's driving the book. From a scheduling perspective, some of the top narrators are scheduled out, as Craig mentioned earlier, with RCA or with RC Bray, years in advance. And so it's to go to somebody with 21 books, in your mind, you're thinking this is X amount of revenue, because it's going to be the per finished hour rate times all of those hours. It's a lot of money, but they not only have relationships with you as the rights holder, they have relationships with various other companies like Podium and Tantor, and they need to be available to do their books as well. So scheduling can be a nightmare with longish series like that. And if you can do it ahead of time, for example, a lot of what we did, we would start doing the audio after we had 6 or 7 books. And so it was hard to get caught up. If you can get it scheduled ahead of time and just let them know that every couple of months there's going to be a new book, it's easier for them to be available. From a process standpoint, what we did to find the right voice is, and this of course is obvious, but it's to go through the audition process. And we would typically send an audition script out, which would be 5-6 minutes of recorded audio. We'd send it out to 8 to 10 different people that we thought might be a good fit, and then just pick the best one who had a schedule that fit our schedule and go from there.
So 2 things that you were talking about, 5 to 6 minutes is about how many words?
It's probably 5,000 words, 4,000 to 5,000 words.
Okay. So just to give somebody an idea of what's going on, I think 9,000 words
an hour.
An hour. So I'm sure it's not 4
Oh,
to
I'm
5,000.
sorry. Yeah, it's less than that. I'm doing the math wrong in my head. Yeah, so typically around 1,000 is what I would try and cap it at 1,000, no more than 1,000.
Okay, just clarifying that.
Yes, thank you. It's I haven't had enough coffee yet.
It's 11 o'clock where you are. Come on, man, you're killing me.
I drink
This
a lot of
coffee
coffee.
is weak.
That's dinner time.
Everyone take a drink. Now, we had a good question from Elaine. Did Steve ever feel like he got the wrong narrator? And the answer is yes to that one.
Yes, the answer to that is yes, and you and I both agree on that. And it wasn't that we had the wrong it wasn't that we had a bad narrator. We had a really good narrator that we slotted into the wrong project. And that was like a big universe kind of thing. You want me to go into details?
Yeah, no, that's fine, because we thought of a strategy, we implemented the strategy with a great narrator and realized it was on us because we had the wrong strategy.
Yeah, and this was a series of books, a lengthy series of books with a spin-off series that had a female lead. So we chose a female narrator for several reasons. One, she's really good. Yeah, I'm
Two
sorry. Yeah,
spin-off
two
females.
spinoffs. Yes, yeah, two spinoffs with female leads. So one, she was really good. Two, she's really fast and always delivers on time, which is important with lengthy series. And one of these series turned into 24 books total, or 21,
22.
and then 8 that spun off another series, and then there was another one that was 6. So there were a lot of books that needed to be done. However, the idea of using a female narrator narrating the books with a male lead did not land well with listeners. And so we
You're
didn't
talking
have
a high quality person too. She's
yes,
amazing.
really top-notch person that we'd had great success with in the past with pretty much everything else that we'd ever done. But this was a mistake. We could have used her for the other 2 or 3 series that were spinoffs of this, but we needed somebody else. So we wound up re-recording the first 5 books of that series with a male lead and going forward from there. So that was kind of an expensive lesson.
Right. And our idea, just to give you the understanding behind what we were considering, was we felt that the congruency between all of the different characters, because these characters were in all 3 series. So the daughter was in all 3 series. The main love interest female led was in all series. So we were thinking, except for the male, and the male lead was in the other 2. So he would show up. And we were thinking, well, she's going to do the male lead anyway, and these other 2, why don't we just make it a congruent across all of them? And that was where it failed.
Yeah, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And
Yes.
the re-recorded audiobooks are doing much better, and we're continuing to produce those.
Good. That's good to hear. We did have a question. I know there was a big kerfuffle out in the world on the Amazon, the returns issue for audiobooks. Did you ever see an issue with those? Because I personally never did see an issue, although I did spend a lot of time when I was talking to Amazon back in December. I did spend a lot of time talking to them about that, or actually back in November.
I'm going to leave this one for Michael because he's answered this on another podcast, and just for consistency purposes, we'll let him answer.
Okay, so there were a few different things, and Craig and I did talk about this offline related to that. I believe that Amazon and Audible have the data that's necessary to figure out what is going on. If the individual or individuals are almost mental about doing this return policy, they would see it and they would kick it off. I felt personally it wasn't going to be a big issue. It wasn't a big issue. And mind you, once again, LMBPN has 200 plus books. From hearsay, third party only, the hearsay is that it affected specifically one genre horribly. It's the romance genre. And, and everything about romance is hyped, meaning from the standpoint of they sell a ton of books, they sell a ton of audio, and they have a ton of problems if there's anything that goes wrong. And so they saw a disproportionate, I think, issue compared to, say, someone like us, where we're in urban fantasy and science fiction and, genres that are a little bit different. So I see nothing that says that their experience was bad. I believe it was. I think that they had some issues with some, quote, fans who were like, great, I can do this. And it exploded. We didn't see it. So it's
where we saw returns, and it was pretty much on us for these returns. They would be situations where we had a box set of a complete series in audio, and someone would download the first book in audio, see that there was a box set, and return it, and presumably then buy the box set. So that's primarily where we would see returns. And industry-wide, the return rates, somewhere between 3.5% and 5%. So.
And in video game, I did some research on that. Video games, it's 10%. And I think one of the issues that has now been changed by Amazon now, if anybody returns the title beyond 7 days from date of purchase, Amazon will pay the author their full royalty, and just if they return it, well, that's on Amazon. So one of the things that went this summer was we had the pandemic, and there were people with hundreds and hundreds of audiobooks, and Amazon was saying, hey, if you have an audiobook, you don't like, you can return it. And people who are hurting for cash, this is my perspective, that, oh, hey, I have 100 audiobooks and Amazon said I can return them. Let me dump those. And then at the beginning of the month, Amazon did a reconciliation. And so people would see, oh my God, I've got a negative balance of $200 here. That's, 40 titles or something. So I think it was a confluence of events that came together and highlighted the issue, because one of the things is we don't get the return data from Amazon. Now, with my traditional publisher, I the 4 books that we talked about, my 5-year anniversary, I get all the data from them once a quarter. Hey, here's your data, here's returns and all that stuff. So I see all those numbers. But with Amazon on your audio, you don't see returns. On your ebooks or paperbacks, you will see returns when you get your monthly roll-up of data. So it's just a disconnect with that. And I think that eventually we will see that from audio as well, as because we have it now. And they have to have it because they pay the money back. So the data's there. I think we will eventually get it.
So Craig, have you done box sets for any of the audio that you've done yourself? Have you put together audio box sets?
Yes. And they do fabulously well. Going back to my book anniversary, we did each book individually. There were 3 books at first. I initially planned it as a trilogy, but I left it open. So we did 3 books. We did 3 individual audios. Then we did a bind up of those 3 into a box set audio. We did an individual paperback of book 1, and they didn't do books 2 and 3, but then they did a bind up paperback of books 1 to 3. And just recently, I'm like, hey, it's been a few years. How about if we bind up book 4? Because we added a book 4 to the series to wrap up all the issues. And they are working on that now to make a new bind up of all 4 books, because the 1 to 3 bind up was 18 hours, 20 hours, and that does well. I think the magic number that I've seen is 14 hours. Anything less, people are skeptical about using their Audible credit. Anything more, my biggest seller is my one that's 30 hours. And never did the individual books. I did all 3 as a single bind up, single box set. And so when we publish this 4-book set, now we'll be up towards 26, 27 hours. And I have high hopes that it will generate all new sales, because the other bind up's been out for 3 years. So yes, a repackaging that costs no extra effort, a little time for the producer to combine the files. But man, I think that is a great way to go, because box sets on ebooks sell well. The combining of them, it's a little bit different target audience. And on audiobooks, if you haven't done it, I think it's a great opportunity, especially if some time has passed. It's not like I published a 3rd book, I immediately did a 3rd book audio, and then a month later I did the bind up. Now give us some time, and then you might see that a whole new flood of sales.
Yeah, for us, I mean, we have, obviously we're looking at the revenue that the individual books generate. And when those start to trend down, that becomes then the time to open up that next window for revenue. But there's a little bit of a disconnect between what we as indie producers and indie authors think is going on, and in survey results of people who survey audiobook listeners. We believe that most audiobook listeners are more inclined to want something, as you said, Craig, that's 14 hours or more, especially if it's a credit situation. There's a term called credit worthiness. And that makes perfect sense. But the most recent survey results from the APA that were released at last year's APAC showed that there was only like 14% that made a decision to buy an audiobook once it got beyond 8 hours. It was evenly split between 3 hours and 8 hours in terms of, would I buy it if it's this long? And it was a very small percentage that would buy it if it were longer than that. It's
only
not
if it were longer than that.
It's not a decision-making criteria for a lot of listeners.
Is that genre-based?
I'm sure. Well, it's not genre-based. It's everything-based. Everything's lumped together in one for that particular survey. But yeah, obviously, if you can get 6 audiobooks for the price of 1, that makes logical sense. But for people who are looking for entertainment or information or whatever it may be, it doesn't seem to be a driving force when you when you survey a large number of audiobook listeners?
Yeah, so I think from that, I'd like to see it based. When it comes to nonfiction, you're going to answer my question. I'm okay with shorter books. In fact, the longer ones turn me off. I'm like, I don't want to listen to 14 hours of How to Be Your Best Friend. Get in there, get me my answers, and get me out of there. But when it comes to, am I going to spend time with my favorite characters? I do want longer, and I did look, personally. I'm another one who's been an audiobook avid listener for 20 plus 30 years. And so, for me, I would be one of those 14%, that's looking at that. So it's real quick. The answer to book length translate to audiobook length. It's approximately 9,000 words per hour, depending on how fast your audio narrator speaks. So I can answer that one real quick. And going forward on some of that. Now, also, I'd like to say, like LMBPN's reality from our audiobook sales is nothing like some of the people we know. Dakota Kraut, is he was on here earlier, so I'll point him out. His audiobook sales are stellar. He has audiobook sales that is more akin, in my opinion, more akin to a James Patterson type equivalent. We're nowhere near that on ours. And so it also depends on who you talk to. If you're the single individual person producing a series that is massively selling, like Arthurian Gambit in the beginning, or what's going on with Dakota, then your audio sales are going to be dramatically different. Or here's another one. Craig, you can speak a little bit to this, but you had a mechanized warfare, the Scorpion on the front and everything. You have a series that we sold the license to another company, but the audio seems to be doing better than the ebooks are. And I've heard that of others, that you have authors who their ebooks are okay, but their audio is killing it. And so you have a massively different experience depending on who you're speaking to. So we can certainly tell you about, what are these issues within choosing an audio narrator, getting on their calendar. How do you deal with, there are things they're going to come back to you and ask you about SAG-AFTRA. That's its own weeds that you have to deal with. And so there are some issues there. And, we can speak to that, but when you're looking more for advice on your particular business, meaning you as an indie author, am I going to invest in it or am I going to license it? And, what are some good numbers related to that? Turnaround time, you should be making sure that if they don't commit to a decent amount of time to produce the books, you get them back. Don't just let them have 7 years to
put that in the
produce your book.
contract.
Yeah. So there's some things with that. So I just want to mention that. So related to that on the money side, do reach out to individuals and find out what are their experiences and find, the pieces that you can learn from that's relevant to you.
Yeah, I tell you, my Mill Sci-Fi, Metal Legion, Super Dreadnought are absolutely destroying it on audio compared to the bind-ups, the complete series sets are doing just fine. I mean, we promoted the hell out of those in December, and they're still ranked really high. They're still cranking on on page reads and stuff like that. But the audio is almost like on autopilot in how well it sells and keeps going. Because I know there was a question there from Elaine on how do you advertise audiobooks. We said right up front, we advertise our audiobooks by pushing our ebooks, and when they get to the product page, they see that they're available in multiple formats. I personally have built an audiobook list, but I don't use it very much. I've only sent 3 or 4 emails to them, so I don't market my audiobooks very well at all. I don't use any advertising or promotion either. So I don't. Do we as LMBPN and you, Steve, do you do anything uniquely to sell those books?
Well, we have an audio specific group on Facebook. That's one way we do it. We make a big point of including audio information in emails that go out to sell the ebook. So that, let's say, series book 5 comes out and series book 1 is just coming out in audio, we'll mention that. So as a way of letting people know. We've tried advertising audiobooks, just like social media advertising. Didn't work super well. I read something a few days ago about where people are finding new audiobooks. If they want something to listen to and they don't know what to get. The least likely way to influence them is through social media. So it's like 43% don't get any of that information from social media, and an even larger percentage don't get any of it from social media advertising, which kind of makes sense. Almost everybody gets it just from scrolling through whatever app or website where they buy their ebooks. So having a good cover, it's not unlike ebooks, having a good cover, showing up, having the keywords set correctly, makes it more likely that people searching for things like you write are going to show up for them. And now the availability of things in libraries, Hoopla, Overdrive, things like that, and the ease with which we can get audiobooks into there now, if we're not Amazon exclusive or Audible exclusive, that just exposes them to a whole new audience.
You bring up an interesting point. So we have a product that is really more for the ladies market. We had gone through Audible. We got this Audible exclusivity, which we can discuss being able to break that after a year, whatever you're in it, because LMBPN now for our books, we focus on wide. We stopped going Amazon exclusive, except for series that we were already in it and what we had to deal with that. So one of the things we learned is we had a book and it didn't do as well as we thought it would. And so conversely, the audio didn't do as well. Well, we happened to put it into audio through Findaway, I believe, and Steve, do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yes, I think
can
I
you
do.
finish that story?
Well,
The dating game.
Yeah, this was a book that, as Michael said, didn't do all that well as an ebook. We tried it with Audible exclusive. It didn't do all that well. We asked that they release it, and they did. And we went wide, and it didn't sell all that well. But all of a sudden, we started to see revenue from libraries, and like little bits of revenue because
in Australia.
Yes, in odd places and streaming services that we didn't even know existed. So it might be 3 cents here, 10 cents there, $1.19 here, that kind of thing. But it began to add up, and that was sort of eye-opening for us and helped to encourage us to move even more quickly to the wide market.
And that's also a title that wasn't doing well. So you already had it produced. It was sitting there. It's a year on Audible. So it's like, hey, let's try something different. So $1.19 and 50 cents is better than nothing, which is where it was. And this
Correct.
is, you can always repackage and try to find a different audience. And I think the library audience is growing hugely, especially because I think people can now check out audio remotely. So libraries are a great opportunity to, like you said, find new readers. And if they like the book, then they'll start looking for more books by that author in that series or by that narrator. All of it's a win.
One of the great things about audio and libraries, it can be more challenging getting ebooks from libraries. You can get them, but if you go certain directions, you can only get an EPUB and you have to read it on your computer or something weird. But with audiobooks, there's always an app, and we're used to listening to audiobooks on an app. It doesn't have to be the Audible app. It doesn't have to be the Apple app for iBooks or Google Play. It can be any app, and it's fine. So if the library has its own specific app or the Hoopla app, I wouldn't want to read ebooks on Hoopla on my phone because I'm old and I don't read ebooks on my phone because I can't even see them. But I'm happy to listen to audiobooks on Hoopla on my phone. It's just pushing a slightly different button.
And that's, like I said, Bookfunnel. Also, now you can sell ebooks through Bookfunnel, and that's a separate app that people have had that works great. They said, "Hey, no problem at all." So that's a yet another opportunity to get your audiobook into somebody's hands.
I'm going to answer Vinny's question real quick. Do I think that the apps like Clubhouse will hurt audiobook sales? And specifically, you're talking about nonfiction because you're not generally going to have a fiction issue. It's going to rise and wane. I just recently got invited over to Clubhouse. I don't want to mention the person who did it necessarily. It was a lady, because I don't know. You have to get people to it's like the beginning of Gmail. You had to get someone to invite you in because they were growing it. and so I don't want to get her inundated. But here's my opinion in all things this way. Clubhouse is now the hot child, the hot thing, the hot ticket, the one to be on, and we will eventually see it either mature or fall away. If it's a nonfiction thing, I guess you're talking about the little rooms where they talk about a certain product or project or whatever. You're going to have the individuals where that works for them. But for most people, they are going to go about their business and they're not going to look into Clubhouse and they're going to move on. Now, I've seen Clubhouse where recordings of Clubhouse get put on YouTube. So it's another way to record a fair amount of information for probably a lot of people. I don't think I know exactly what you're talking about in this case, Vinny, but so I'm just surmising on the bigger part of this. And, people are always going to find new ways to get their information. And you can get it from YouTube. My dad, who is now 80 years old, and yes, I did forget to call him on his birthday, damn it. You'd think I'd have it right by now. Everything else. He is studying YouTube videos up and down on how to cook and how to do, barbecue and everything. So he just goes there. That's his new place to get information. And yet my wife was asking me about Masterclass, which Craig has given out, 2 or 3 or 4 times. He's given out Masterclass. And that's where she was going to go because the person she wanted to learn from was there. So you're going to follow the people you know, and you're going to find the things that are easy. My dad is not going to go on Clubhouse. He's barely learning how to message religiously with people, and it's only taken him 6 years. So, it all depends on how many people, but I believe that Clubhouse is probably one of those that's got the excitement of what's going on. It's kind of like when Twitter first came up and everyone's going, why in the world are people using Twitter? They're all talking about their breakfast. Well, we'll figure out what goes on. And I could see that it's going to affect it in somehow, but will it be out of audiobooks or might it be away from podcasts? Great question. We'll see.
There's been a big shift over the course of the last 3 years in where people are getting audio information to for the purposes of learning, and it's shifted from like 60-40 audiobooks over podcasts to like 75-25 or 70-30 podcasts over audiobooks. So I would think that's a real challenge for people that do nonfiction audiobooks.
Yeah. For those that do fiction, no. Well, but I mean, how about we talk a little bit about speech to text? Mind you, text to speech. The fact that LMBPN, we've been looking, and Steve and I have been talking about it in reviewing products at least 2.5 years related to, being able to transfer our books over to fiction audio and the challenges. Now, mind you, you have a legal reason that you can't do it on Audible. They require a human being on the other side, but the quality is getting certainly close enough to do nonfiction. Fiction is still questionable. There's still somewhat effort, and I was testing it last weekend because I was excited back in December, and I'm like, Steve, it's so close, and he's like, I don't think so, and I'm like, but I listened to like 20 seconds, and it's there, and he's like, I listened a little further. So I was going to prove Steve wrong last weekend. And I'm sitting up having breakfast, going through it. And an hour and a half later, I had to throw the towel in and go, obviously, I don't remember what I was listening to in December. I was insert massive excuse here. But, it's getting closer. But doing a real fiction book strictly with an audio, I wasn't able to locate yet.
So obviously, I suspect we've all heard about the initiative that Google has that's coming out sometime, hopefully early this year, that's specific to using AI to generate audiobooks and going to be targeted to publishers to allow them to do those books that they don't necessarily want to spend the money to have professionally narrated. That will be really interesting to see when that comes out, and I hope we can get an early invitation out there. So Google, since you're listening to everything, if you could be sure that LMBPN gets an invitation to that, we would really love it. And yes, I remember sending Michael this AI clip, thinking, well, he's going to listen to this and say, yeah, it's not quite there yet. And I was a little surprised when he said, this is great, let's do it.
Yeah. Then you were like, totally throwing a wet blanket on everything. I think, Craig, you have the best contacts with Google, so if you'd be so kind as to pass on that request, I'd appreciate it.
That they up their AI game?
No, that they give us an invitation to go to their AI early.
Okay. Yeah, I do. Actually, they just 2 days ago they confirmed their full team coming to 20 Books Vegas 2021. I think they're bringing at least 6.
Nice.
So yeah, I'll contact. I'll give them a shout. And
Please.
Now there are people that we hear from all the time who listen to ebooks. They're not listening to audiobooks. They listen to ebooks through a Kindle device. And it's generally people that have some form of disability that makes it difficult for them to read. And they love that. They don't care that it sounds robotic. It's good enough for them to be able to get the story. And so I think if these new AI generated systems could approach the level that you can get with just the Kindle phone reading your ebook app, that would be an improvement over much of what we've seen.
Yeah, and that's where I was going, because when we start looking at it, whether or not LMBPN produces it or we go with a partner, there are going to be product that we have, that you have listening to us right now, where you're like, it's not worth my investment. Nobody else wants to invest in it. What can you use that product for? Can you take something like a text to speech, and it's good enough that you use it? I mean, you can acquire income just from advertising on YouTube with your book if it was done this way. The software we've been looking at is probably $4 to $6 per hour of speech. So if you're talking a typical 90,000 word book, you're now talking $50, $60 worth of spend to get it transferred into an audio that's good enough. Once you have an idea of what you're trying to accomplish, you're not putting this on Audible or any of the other ones, Hoopla, etc. You are coming back and saying, okay, this is something I'm going to use. You might put it out as a podcast in order for your marketing to bring it in. So there's many different ways, and open your mind to the opportunities you have anytime you have a product. And, we've talked about going to other languages. Audio is just another language. It's another modality for people to learn. Anybody who is smart enough but hasn't gone to school, they don't really like to listen, or excuse me, to read, all the different reasons that they have it. When you move it into audio, you now give it to them in a way that they can understand, and you can get another fan. That fan might talk to somebody who likes books, and now you're back again on the ebook side of things. Go ahead, guys. Craig, what are you
I want to
doing?
comment on something that Vinny said, and this is not a YouTube commercial, but Vinny said for Michael to get your dad YouTube Premium, it's the best $15 you'll ever spend, and I completely agree with that. I mean, we have grandkids, and young kids watch stuff on YouTube, like little kids videos that are just mind-numbing, and it freaks them out when a commercial pops up, and they just start tapping at the phone and the screen, and occasionally they'll just start crying. So $15 a month solves that problem.
Craig does that. I've heard Craig talk about that on our personal calls. He's just
Craig just starts punching at the screen when the commercials come on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Nothing sends me into a rage more, especially when they stop right in the middle of a metal song. Oh my God. Because Michael will send me some metal videos, and of course I jam on them, and sometimes they stop.
I wasn't sure, because essentially you gave me a couple with, obviously one of the best metal singers of all time. And I had to give you some back. I'm like, wait a minute, he's giving me something, reciprocity that needs. So I happened to be like the following day at the evening, I was going through, and somehow I had gotten on different metal, or different songs in my YouTube, and I'm just going down learning all of these new. I'm like, oh, that one's good. Let's send that one to Craig. And I think about it in the evening. I think I ended up sending 3. I go, I have no idea if he even has a desire for anything new, or if, Craig, you only listen to the old stuff.
No, I tell you what, Sabaton Bismarck was awesome. So I jammed that yesterday.
I got that one from Colleen.
And it's and it's a great YouTube video too.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me back of the old days of MTV, not where they were wearing freaking leg warmers and stupid shit like that, but where they actually showed music videos where the artists were included in it and did a little acting and told that story of the video. And Bismarck, that was awesome, man. They go out on a trawler and they're jamming on it, and they got the sonar showing the ship down at the bottom of the ocean. way cool. So yeah, definitely worth a jam. Until, well, that one didn't break into an ad, but other ones do. And it's like, hey man, that's kind of uncool because I've limited bandwidth here.
Hey, Carl Stubblefield, would you mention the voice stream sound? Okay, so the voice stream is the app. I'm sorry, I kind of blew right through that and thought you were talking about, other apps have voices that are like dreamy. And so no, voice stream. So Steve, we might want to put that down as something to go take a look at.
Yeah, I did. And the one that we were testing with was similar in that you can pick different voices and change the intonation and things like that. But yeah, I'll definitely try voice stream. So thanks, Carl.
Yeah. So Facebook user says time to get some Audible book done. I don't know that we've necessarily talked about it from this perspective, but Craig, you'll remember back in the beginning that audio, when it was so exciting to us back in like 2017, 2016, it was all about creating more product streams. And you want to talk about that just for a second?
Well, it does. It brings in a new revenue stream. You have to look at the cash flow, and that's one thing we looked at originally and said this is an acceptable outflow because we had the money to spend at the time. And like I put 2 thrillers on and just paid right up front for them because it's a long game. And if you're in it for the long game, once they earn out, everything after that's gravy. So an ebook, you're advertising and stuff like that, but audio, we weren't really paying money to advertise. It was a strap hanger on the ebook and just created a separate and unique revenue stream. So that's how we looked at it. We weren't no revenue sharing, so it was all us. And I really liked the model, especially since we had the cash to spend at the time. Later, because I've also signed some separate deals where we got a little bit of an advance, and that helped any further cash flow, like translations. I've paid a fair bit to translate my new thrillers into German, and the first one should be coming up here in a week or two with a separate company that I'm working with. And once again, it goes to cash flow because I paid this for the audio, I paid this for, now that book cost me X amount, and getting it back, but through multiple and unique revenue streams. I really like that for the long game. But if you're cash flow restricted, well, then ebook is the easiest way to go. Paperback is easy to go, especially if you buy the full wrap cover at the beginning. And something else you need to mention is that when you contract for that ebook cover and you think you're going to expand, make sure you include, oh, by the way, I'd like a paperback and audio cover too, because then you can get it thrown in for $50. As opposed to, or whatever it might be, as opposed to contacting them later and say, hey, by the way, can I work my way into your schedule to get these other books? But if you've already prepaid them, then it's a lot easier to just jump in and say, hey, oh, by the way, here's my narrator, here's this, can you do this up for me?
Yeah, or if you're not sure whether or not you're going to do that, to just pay the extra money to get the PSD file so that you could just give it to somebody else and have them make the changes if they're not available a year and a half from now.
Yeah, and most of my covers, that's what I do. My backlist, my Craig Martelle Inc. covers, is I get the raw artwork, and I actually have the typography done separately to make sure it's consistent across all my different series.
Yeah, I'm telling Judith on you, Kraut. Just saying. Dakota's giving me crap over here. Your voice is dreamy, Mike. And I thought about admitting to one of the jokes that he and I have related to pictures on the side of the beds and stuff, but that's just too personal.
Yeah, sounds like we might have to call HR.
Good. Get the HR off me.
Yeah, we had to call Craig HR on Craig before we started. He was off on a tangent.
Elaine makes a good point here. Elaine says, and I'll read the question. I did a royalty share through Audible's ACX for my first series. I regret doing it now because there are things I'd like to change, et cetera, et cetera. And that's something that we hear a lot. Craig, have you heard that from just like 20 Books people where they made this decision to go this route because they didn't have the finances to do it initially, but then essentially they've lost control of their series by going completely. That route.
And some of them have lost contact with the person who narrated the book, and because they did a royalty share, and usually these are audio narrators who are trying to establish themselves. You're not going to get a well-established narrator generally, probably through a royalty share. Some of them now you have to pay up front, and oh, by the way, they want to share as well in order to maximize your revenue. But once you lose control because you don't have it, and people cannot get out of those contracts for like 7 years. Some contracts people have been able to negotiate down to 5 years, and some are 10 years. That's an awful long time that you are absolutely stuck. So, yeah, I actually won't ever get into a royalty share of any sort. And if that's the case, then I'll just find a different narrator, because I can't. I like that flexibility. Like almost all my titles have been in ACX long enough that I can petition to have them removed to then get into Findaway. One thing Findaway Voices does, they are the sole distributor now that can get you into Chirp. Chirp is BookBub's audio system, and BookBub it's BookBub, right? The gold standard. If you get a BookBub featured deal, you're going to make a lot of sales. You're going to possibly grab a bunch of new fans, and they're doing that with audio. So it's now a viable, not just a viable revenue stream, but it's a place where you can pick up new fans. So for Backlist, the only way to get there, you go through Findaway, and they can get you to Chirp. And talking with BookBub, they said they may expand, but at this point in time, it's the only way to get there is through Will Deas and his Findaway Voices.
And
so
another benefit of Findaway and using Chirp, if you're an indie author and you're using BookBub, for example, you've got a book one at 99 cents. Maybe you price your book two at 99 cents or $2.99 instead of $5.99. You can do some price promotion. If you're with ACX Exclusive or Audible Exclusive, there's no price promoting that you can do. They set the price for everything. But with Findaway, if you've got a Chirp deal that you're going to make audio book one available for $2.99, you can make audio book two available for $5.99, and give people a little bit more incentive to keep going with the series. So Findaway allows you to have control over the pricing of your series.
That's a huge factor. Because I mean, look at our promotions, and I'm huge. I wrote the book, right, on pricing strategies, and it's finding readers, finding listeners. It's all the same game of how do you get that into your hands. Supermarkets have been doing this for decades with the sample people. At the end of the aisle with the sample. Hey, here's a little piece of pizza. I don't understand how the toilet paper sample people work, but we're talking pizza here. You get a sample of that pizza. Yeah, it's me. HR, I'm back. It's a sample of pizza. It's, do you want to buy this pizza? Do you want to buy this snack? Do you want to buy this piece of candy? And it's like, oh, hey, look at these. We've got pallets of M&Ms. Have a little cup of M&Ms. And people try it and say, yeah, and then buy it. And that's when you control your prices, you can do that. A lot of people, hey, this is Martelle. He's a new author to me. I'm not going to jump in and pay $15 or $19 or $29.99 for the first audiobook in order to listen to see if I like them, because I might figure that out in the first 5 minutes that I don't. And so the cost is prohibitive. And if you can throw something at them for $2.99, here you go. Give it a shot, and people will buy it. They probably won't return it because, hey, I got it for $2.99. I listen, hey, not bad. And then move on. Pricing is a critical marketing tool.
Yeah, and Dakota makes a really good point in the chat about some of the possible negatives with royalty share. So if you're listening on Facebook and you can read that in the chat, that's a great point. If the book does really well, you're paying a lot of money to have the book narrated.
Yeah, and there's just so many things you're not allowed to do once you do that. So while we certainly understand it was always tempting to all of us in the beginning to do royalty share because you didn't have to pay for the audio narrator. And when you're early, it's very convincing. It's like, at least I'll have some book out. And I have a publishing friend, Craig and I, well, all three of us do, who is okay with that because he's never planning to spend any effort whatsoever. Better to have a product out there than never having a product out there. Now, this particular publisher has also got like 1,500 titles. So it's a little bit different situation. So always be, familiar with what you're doing. And then Dakota, also check Slack, please.
Slack. Get on Slack, Dakota. Come on. There's info waiting for you. All right. Hey, look at that. We've been on, believe it or not, we've been on for an hour already. It's always fun talking with Steve and Michael and just discussing things, especially stuff like Steve has gone to the Audible. He goes to those conferences. He hears, he listens. He was access to that survey. That's good stuff that we generally wouldn't hear, because I know I hear that, hey, you have to get R.C. Bray as a narrator, otherwise, man, your book's just not going to do as well. And maybe not, but it's not the huge detriment that it could possibly, that you might visualize in your mind that it is.
Yeah, it's been great for me over the course of the last 3 or 4 years to just become so involved in the LMBPN audio process. And for somebody that's an audio geek, this is, it's just great fun to come to work every day.
Oh, I forgot to mention real quick. If you license out your book, licensing out for a single narrator is not the same as licensing for multi-narration cast. You can sell both licenses. So even everybody, they're different products. So you're welcome to license the multicast narration. Look at your contracts. If they're not a company that does multicast, strike it and make sure that you get to keep that in case you either decide to do it yourself, which I wouldn't suggest at the moment, or you get to work with a company that does it.
And Michael earlier mentioned SAG-AFTRA. Can you break out that acronym, Steve, and tell us a little bit about working with them?
Yeah, it's the Screen Actors Guild. Essentially, it's the old, you hear people that work in films are part of SAG-AFTRA. It's the same for narrators. They're voice actor. They're voice actors.
A union.
It is a union, and it is a great union for the people that are in the union. They offer a lot of really good benefits to the people that are in the union. There are some top narrators who are not in the union, but most top narrators are. But that's not to say that most narrators in general are. There are a lot of, you have to do enough revenue over the course of a year consistently to get the benefits of SAG-AFTRA membership. So for people just starting out, they're generally not in SAG-AFTRA. So that essentially, if you're hiring a SAG-AFTRA talent, you will be paying the SAG-AFTRA fee. And let's just say it varies depending on contract, but let's just say it's around 15%.
And that goes to retirement, health benefits.
They get amazing health benefits and retirement benefits, and it's great. We're happy when we deal with SAG-AFTRA actors. We're happy to pay that. And the way to do it, if you don't have a contract directly with SAG-AFTRA, and you've got to be pretty big to get to that point, is to deal with what's called a paymaster. And there are a few of those. You can sign up for a paymaster through Audible or through ACX when you're working it that way, or there are other just standalone paymasters. And essentially what they do is you pay the paymaster a fee, and then they pay the narrator the per finished hour rate plus the rate, the SAG-AFTRA rate. Let's say that's 15%. So if it's $5,000 for the talent, then it's $5,000 plus $750, plus a small administration fee for the paymaster, and that makes it really simple to do.
Yep, that's my last 2 books. I sent payments to New York City and not where not my narrator, like I had done previously. So and he said I have to do it this way because they saved my bacon over the last couple of years. So that's the way to go. All right, guys. Any final words, Michael?
I do not have any final words.
My final words are just to reiterate what Michael said and think about what the idea of doing multicast. If you've got a successful audio series and you haven't sold the multicast rights, there are companies out there that are looking for those rights.
Multicast. That's where they have music, they have sound effects, and they have multiple actors that aren't dueling voices. One person doing all the voices. It's a different person for each voice mainly.
Now that also, I heard this, I can't remember who was talking about it. Look to the definition, like Craig said, about what multicast is, because if you decide to put out a product of your own and it fits within this multicast license, you could have another way to build a product. And so, look at what that is. What is it? and you might have your own options to be able to build that.
And I would not be surprised if the license agreements that we see from licensing companies begin to change to try and absorb those licensing
We have
rights
seen it.
with a single contract.
Yeah, we have seen it, and we push back. We're like, tell me exactly how you. So no, but we didn't know. 3 years ago when we started this, we didn't really understand the differences between them, which is only why we're highlighting them. It's just like, be aware. Now, there are some companies, like Dreamscape is a company that does have both single and multi, but you would kind of need to ask them and go, are you going to actually do it? I mean, you're asking for this license. Is this just because it's normal? Or are you, ask them to modify and say, if you choose not to implement something within 12 months, then these rights for multicast revert back to me or something.
Yeah, and it's easy when you get the contract from, especially if you're new, if you get the contract from a licensor, a licensing partner, and they will very likely say, well, this is the contract. It's been signed by thousands of authors. Don't worry about it. They will negotiate those contracts.
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, thank you very much for coming on, Steve. We appreciate your time, appreciate your expertise most of all. And Michael, LMBPN, I think the number you came up with was in excess of 570 audio titles available with from LMBPN Publishing. That's a monumental effort. Yeah, and that's people but licensed to them.
Yes.
To produce LMBPN titles. So a massive undertaking, and Steve has taken a lot of that burden, making sure that the covers align, that there's metadata like the blurb and the stuff, because people browse, like you said, great cover, a blurb to seal the deal. Blurbs seal the deal. All right, everybody, you have a great day, and we will talk to you later.
Adios.
Thanks.